Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we will be doing the tutorial on the explosion scene that you've seen from the Wonder Woman superhero landing. So I'm basically going to show how to create a smoke that dissipates, and then also the ground kind of exploding upwards. Okay, so let's begin with the smoke. So delete this cube, just reset some stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start off by creating a plane. So let's Control A and add a plane in the center. I'm going to make it like quite big, because if I have a really big smoke domain, like I don't need to do a lot of details, because then I can shrink it down, and if my scene is small and I shrink down the smoke, then I can do a lot less work for a good enough smoke simulation. Okay, so let's take this object and let's go into quick effects, quick smoke. So you can already see like there's a kind of smoke appearing. I'm gonna just increase the domain a little bit, and I might grab it in the Z direction a bit, because ultimately I want the smoke to hit the ground and then kind of dissipate. So I kind of want the ground to be close enough to where the smoke is gonna emit from. Okay, in any case, let's go into here and let's go into this kind of physics panel, and you can see that the fluid is already enabled. And the type is flow type is smoke. I mean, there's a lot of, you can like simulate fire as well. The fire is pretty cool. But in this case, she's not really gonna burn up anything. I'm gonna keep pretty much everything as the default value for the actual source. So the next thing to do is to look at the domain, and this is where, you know, the small particles be generated. And if you look at the type, I'm gonna use gas. And so the resolution divisions, this is the amount, this is the number that is the main number that determines how long your simulation will take, or how long the baking will take. So I'm gonna basically keep this at 50. So most of the time, if you go on YouTube and look at other simulations, for really nice simulations, you need like several hundreds, like 200, 300. But I think for this, we don't really need intense smoke. It's just kind of light smoke. So I'm gonna keep that at 50, and I'm going to take the buoyancy of this to 5, because I kind of want the smoke to be able, when it's pushed down, I still want it to kind of dissipate upwards. I'm going to keep the heat at 1, and I want the vorticity to be also set at 1, because vorticity is just like how much kind of circulational and circulatory flow you have in the box. I just want it to be kind of windy, you know. So also we're going to need to add noise, because noise makes it look a lot better than without. So I'll keep the default values. You can technically do dissolve if you want 20. If you set this dissolve at, say, 20, then every smoke particle that's generated will dissolve after 20. But we're just gonna not use that. And then for cache, so because I'm using Blender 2.83, yeah, so I think before you can literally just generate on the spot, but for now you need to actually do some baking, which means it pre-calculates everything in the domain, and then you save that as a file, and then every time you play it, it just gets the cache, use the cache from the file that you saved. So I'm just gonna just save it on my desktop in my test folder. Okay, and I'm going to say, okay, let's just do 100 frames, and let's see, you need to make sure the type becomes modular. Is it modular or final to be able to do any baking? And viewport display, that's pretty much all I want to change for this simulation. So now when you click that, you can see that I can now bake data and bake noise, but you need to bake data first. But before we do that, I'm just going to take both of these objects and then just Control A and scale, just reset the scale, because I think that causes some issues if you don't reset it sometimes. So let's reset the scale, and I'm going to then bake. Sorry, you need to click the domain to bake data, and this hopefully won't take too long. If I put it to like 300, it takes like 15-20 minutes, and I don't really want to wait. 19 seconds ish. And then I'm gonna bake the noise as well. Alright, 17 seconds, not that bad. Okay, so now if I don't know, if I play this, okay, you can see like it basically, it's alright, it's expanding, but it's expanding upwards because it's buoyant and it's very dissipatory because we have high vorticity. So what I'm going to do then in the layout, let's go back to frame 0. I'm going to add some wind, so Shift A, I'm going to add a force field and wind. So let's grab this upwards a bit. Now let's position it somewhere not too far up. I'm gonna rotate this 180. And then I'm gonna just maybe scale this up a little bit so that, you know, it's not just a point source. Okay, so let's take a look at the wind. The strength, maybe I'll just set it to like, I don't know, 5. And maybe grab it up a bit. Let's bake it again. You can free the data. So once you free the data, the cache is freed as well, which means that, you know, you won't just keep generating more and more data because this ends up taking a lot of space, especially if you put your resolution divisions to like 200, 300, that's like several gigabytes, and the more frames you have, you can go up to, you know, 700 gigabytes. Okay, cool, we're done, and then we're gonna bake noise. Okay, 16 seconds. It's about I mean, it will take the same amount of time, like last time. So let's play that again. Ooh. Okay, so you can see the wind, yeah, isn't really doing the best of jobs. Also, because you can see that the smoke pretty much dissipates after like, you know, 40 to 50 frames, the first smoke that comes out. I'm just gonna reduce the frames that I want the domain to save up until like maybe 60 frames, because there's no really need for that much. She's just gonna fall, and then yeah. So you see that the strength was, let's just bring up the strength maybe like 10, and I might also grab this down a little bit. Okay, let's try baking that again. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, this looks a bit better. I mean, basically everything here we can kind of discard, but that's okay because you can actually play around with the smoke density after you finish baking, so you can control how much of the smoke you want visible as the animation goes on. So even if we want the smoke to be, say, to be gone by this point, we can still have the data, but you know, just get rid of the density. I should have probably made this a circle rather than a square, because that kind of looks wrong. So I'm gonna add an edge here, add an edge here, and then I'm gonna basically take all of these and then right click, loop tool, circle. Okay, so let's try rebaking that because I kind of want a more circular source. I mean, obviously you can play around with the circularity of it. Okay, that's looking a little better. Cool. Okay, smoke is pretty much done. And next, let's just go into a different layer. So if you look at scene, this is, I'm just gonna call this smoke scene, and I'm gonna create a new scene, and let's call it, you know, explosion. So I think there's two different ways, right? You can just create different scenes, and you can work on some objects separately. Or if, for example, I go back to the smoke scene, and if you look up here, I can create a new collection. So I can call this, for example, explosion. And if I just unview this, I can just work on the collection and then move between collections. But I prefer just having different scenes because it's easier to manage. But in any case, in this, so let's create an explosion. And for this, we're going to basically use a very nice add-on called Self Fracture. So let's begin by creating a cube. The original default cube. We'll actually use it for now. Okay, so I'm going to scale that up. Scale this baby up. Okay, maybe even a bit. Okay, go into edit mode. Okay, this is really annoying. There's not enough lot of space on my desk. Control R. Add in some loops. Crap ton of loops. And then this way as well. Okay, this is alright. And then I want to create basically a region in the center in which the explosion will kind of, the debris will come from. Let's go into top view and go into wireframe mode. And let's just say, I want this bit. Okay, this bit here. And I'm gonna just right click and make that circular, because if the smoke is circular, I kind of want the ground explosion to be circular just to match it. And I might make it a bit randomized. So if I right click loop tools and I do a bit of relaxed, and let's maybe space, relax it a bit more, relax it a bit more, just to make it a bit less uniform, you know. Let's see, space. Yeah, okay, that's alright. P for selection to separate this as a loose part. Ooh. Let's see. Okay, it doesn't actually. It's all still within the plane. Let's go back into solid mode. So I've got this little piece here, and if I click the slash button, you can just view this specific object. And I'm gonna take the top loop, and the bottom loop. Okay, and then I'm gonna control E, bridge edge loops. Yeah, okay, that looks pretty alright. Pressing that slash again will get you back to viewing everything together. For the cell fracture add-on, you go into Edit, Preferences, and here you can just search for cell fracture. It should be built. Click that, and when you go into Object, Quick Effects, you can have cell fracture. So now it's like a bunch of stuff pops up. You can play around with the stuff, but basically I just want small shatter bits rather than big. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. The scale is fine. So then it performs a cell fracture for you, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hide the outside edge, but here you can see that you have pieces, but on top of it you still have the original part. So I'm just going to delete that, and then you just have the pieces, which looks quite nice. And let's just unhide everything. So we have the basis of everything. I want to just create one more object. Let's just get icos here, grab it, and I want to make, so this is the sphere that's gonna like pop up and then just break everything. And I think this is the method that most people use anyway. So let's just scale that up a bit. Okay, and then I'm gonna just grab it down here. So we'll just leave that there. But now we can first, before we do anything, I've realized I forgot to add texture on it. You really should have added texture before, because all the UV editing, all the UV unwrapping would have been fine. Yeah, so if you unwrap it at the very end, it kind of screws up everything. I should have put in the material before I created this mesh. Okay, let's just redo this part. So this part and this part, just join. Everything, I'm just gonna merge by distance. Okay, cool. I think I've got everything back to original. Let's first just mark some seams so that. Why does the screencast key keep turning itself on and off? It's so annoying. Ugh. Okay, this part, let's mark the seams outside of a cube. Control E, mark seam, and then I'm gonna mark these two as well. And maybe also this one. And this one. That should be how you unwrap this cube, right? So let's unwrap it. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, not the best, but let's just take all of this. Let's grab it, because I want everything to be quite uniform. So, okay, now it's a bit more uniform. Take all of that. Okay, let's just save this project. Have I not saved this project? Okay. Anyway, so this is what we have. So let's just add in some texture, and I'm just gonna use the same websites I always use for the textures. So for this, I'm gonna go to material and add a new material. Let's call this gravel. Okay, and then for this, let's use nodes. So in the texture painting node, let's grab a new thing. In the shader editor, use nodes. Okay, so for the gravel, you can see this gravel, we're just gonna add a image texture 3 times. Actually, let's just duplicate this. Stop turning yourself off. I'm gonna try to do my best to keep that on, to make sure that's on. Okay, for this one, I'm just gonna find some stuff that I downloaded a while ago. Okay, doesn't look very good, so let's go to UV editing, and you can see it's just, let's just scale it up. Okay, that looks not the worst. Let's go a little bit more. It looks a bit repetitive, but that's kind of one of the... I think there's like a lot of videos out there to make things less repetitive looking, but for the sake of this, I'm just gonna use it. Okay, this is already quite well unwrapped, so I'm just gonna assign this the same material, gravel. I'll scale this up as well. Okay, cool. So we got our material. Control E, rigid loops. Okay, I don't really care about this popping line. Can we scale this one? Ugh, that's kind of weird message. Next direction. Just scale it up. Just take this one scene. And then I'm just gonna grab this whole face loop here. And then unwrap that. Cool. Scale that in. This is very hacky, and I feel like I'm just trying to figure things out on the spot, so this might... Okay, I mean, that's alright. Okay, anyway, this is a lot more care that I did for my actual like video, so I think in the video this might actually end up looking nicer. Anyway, I've got this done, and it's now textured, so we can just add the cell fracture, and then the texture should stay where it is. Okay, so now we have like all the pieces that we want. It's textured, and we just want to generate the physics. And to generate the physics, what you want to do is, first of all, when all of these explode out, there's gonna be a hole left. So to get rid of the hole, my very hacky way is just to fill in this edge loop. We can do fill faces. Fill. Looks pretty good. How about grid fill? Okay, grid fill looks pretty okay. You can play around with the span, and maybe I'll have a higher span. And the offset as well, so you can rotate it a bit. Here's the maximum. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna pretty much leave it at that. Yeah, so now the hole is technically filled, but you still kind of see through it. I think in animation you will, but this is the best I can do. I'm gonna add in the physics. So for this object, we want it to be a rigid body, and we want it to be passive, and we want it to be animated, because we're gonna make our own animation for this object, and then it will affect the active components, which are the debris. This plane is not gonna move, hopefully, which means as a rigid body, it will also be passive, but it will not be animated, because we're not adding an animation, and it shouldn't move at all. Let's just hide the plane, and all of these pieces, we are going to want them to be rigid bodies, and we want them to be active and dynamic. So the fact that these dots are here means that we can actually animate these things, and because if I put them as dynamic from the start frame, it means it's just going to, you know, fall from under gravity, and they're going to move around. So I want to turn on the the noun of dynamic at the frame in which I want them to start exploding. So, but before I do that, I want to, so let's turn off dynamic. Well, let's turn it on for now. And maybe make them as 10 kilogram object because they're quite large debris. And I'm going to basically when you do this active, you're only turning this yellow shaded active on. It's the active that's selected. So to make sure all of these are actually active objects and dynamic, we go into Object, and we go into Rigid Body and Copy from Active. So now all of these, as you can see, are all active. Okay, one more thing. I'm just gonna take the object and set the origin to geometry, just kind of resetting the thoughts of it so that the origin of every piece is at its geometric center. Okay, so now we got all of this happening and it's dynamic. Let's figure out the animation of how we want this to hit the object. So in the Animations tab, everything so you can see right now it's dynamic and it falls apart. So what we want to do is, let's say I want this object to hit the top at, I don't know, maybe the 20th frame. Let's say 20th frame. So here, for this object at the first frame, I'm just gonna insert location. So the object's location is inserted as a keyframe. And then at frame 20, I'm gonna grab this up, like that. And then I'm gonna insert the location. I mean, obviously you can do a bunch of other stuff, but I just, for simplicity's sake, just the object is gonna move from here to here. And basically at the 20, so as you can see, it starts colliding it at the object around. It's kind of annoying. I should have left it as non-dynamic, but anyway. It starts basically colliding the object at, I don't know, the 15th frame. So we know that around the 15th frame is where we want all of the debris to start becoming active objects and being able to be affected by this big rock. So let's go back into the first frame. I'm gonna highlight all of this and then go into the settings, physics settings. And I'm basically gonna say at frame 1, dynamic goes to nothing. I don't want it to be dynamic. And then at frame 15, I want it to be dynamic. 1. Turn this on. Dynamic is off. And then frame here, dynamic is on. So you can see that one object stays where it is until now, when it explodes. So now what I want to do is basically I want every other rock to copy its animation. So to do that, you do Control L, make links to animation data. So now you've got a bunch of new stuff, which means all of these are animated. If you click on the random one, yeah, you can see basically all of them are stationary until that frame. Okay, so from now on, I just want it to be completely dynamic. So that's literally all I want to do. Turn this off. Beware of that button there. It will record everything you do. Okay, so let's just, one more thing I want to do is I just want to create kind of a background so that the lighting will look a little better. Every time you have a background so that light can bounce off, it's a lot better than having an infinite, background where the light will just travel on forever. And it's hard to get lighting that way. Anyway, I've mumbled way too much. Stop turning so off. Let's just scale it up. Yeah, I think in my other animation I had another wall going this way so I can look at it from like a 45-degree, kind of like a side view. But for the purpose of this, I will just leave it as a screen as a background. The animation, so sometimes if you pull it, for example, now you don't see it, but it's just, I think, not calculating it in real time. But so the physics is there, but I want to make all of the pieces keyframes. So every keyframe, I want the position of everything, the motion, all of that to be keyframed. So to do that, how do we keyframe? If we go into layout, I want all of this stuff to be keyframed. F3, and I'm gonna bake 2 keyframes. Sure. And what you notice is everything kind of clashes, like compresses together. because I think it resets the origin of everything. So what we need to do is make every single debris a single user, like a single, like its own object. So to do that, you go into Objects, you go into Relations, and make single user, and you just do object animation. And then if I try rebaking it, see, now like it stays where it is. I don't know, you know, I have no idea how long I've struggled with this issue, but this finally works. Okay, so now if we go into animations, you can see, like, if I highlight this, you can see that the keyframes are now here, which means all of the positions and motion of these are all saved up until frame 60. So that means we can actually get rid of the sphere and get, because it is no longer required, because the physics, all the physics that's computed is now saved as keyframes. So we can actually delete this, but I'm just going to leave it there for now, for completeness sake. Okay, so everything's now baked to keyframes. And what I want to do then is I'm going to take the smoke here. I'm gonna grab the plane as well. I'm just gonna copy it. So Control C, and then I'm going to go to explosion, and then Control V. So now I've added in the smoke. Now the smoke is a bit small, but I can, you know, for example, scale it up. But remember, our smoke has really bad divisions. It's only got 50 divisions. So if you scale it up, it's gonna look really, really bad and like no resolution at all. So what I'm going to do then is, instead of scaling the smoke, I'm gonna hide the smoke, and I'm gonna scale everything here. But to scale that, I need to, the easier way is just to, for example, create an empty. I'm gonna parent everything here to that empty. Control P, object. So now if I move the empty, the whole system moves, which is very nice because I don't want to click everything individually. And so let's just take, so if I scale the empty, you can see the whole system also scales, which is so helpful. I'm gonna scale that down, and I'm just gonna grab it to, let's just play the smoke. Okay, so around this frame, I can see that it hits the floor, and I want to match that floor to the floor of the actual object. So let's match that floor. That's about that. I want to play around with the density of the smoke. So for that, let's go into texture paint. And so for the smoke here, you can see that we can add a new, it's just got a smoke material. Let's just call it smoke. And then here, we don't really want a surface. We don't want this. We don't want a surface texture. We want a volume texture. Let's make it pink smoke. And then the density, for now, I'm just gonna play it as 5. Yeah, not very nice. We want the smoke to first be invisible until the explosion starts. So if I go to, say, frame, was it 15? 15 was when everything started exploding. So what we want to do is gradually increment the density of the smoke until it's visible around 15, which means at the 0th frame, or the first frame, in texture paint, I want this density to be 0. And then to click 0, and then you hit I, 0, hover over it, and then I. That inserts a keyframe, because if you go to animation, you can see there's a smoke keyframe there. Then, at frame, was it 15? Let's say 14. At frame 14, we still want the density to be 0. So we hit I again. This makes sure that it stays 0 the whole way, because at frame 15, let's say I want the density to be 3. That means that if I didn't have this keyframe at 14, the density will gradually increase from 0 until 3, and that's not what we want. So at 15, we want it to become 3, and let's say at 20, we want it to maximize, and let's make it 5 at that point. Insert keyframe, and then we want it to gradually disappear. But let's just say I want the smoke to be really intense now, and as you can see that around 40 frame-ish, the smoke has dissipated. And around, so at frame 40, let's say I want it as 4.5. So it's slowly graduatingly diminishing in density or in visibility. And by the time it goes to frame like 47, I basically want it to become 0. So, and it will stay 0 if we don't add any more keyframes. You can see there's nothing there. Then, like, okay, the problem now is that as I play the animation, let's go to this mode here. You can see that the smoke, the smoke is happening now, but the animation is a bit slower. So we basically want to retime it, which means if we, for example, see the smoke starts moving down immediately and hits the ground around frame 13. So we really want frame 13 to be the frame where like the ball has already hit the object. So to do that, what I can do is, for example, hide the smoke for now, click all of this, go into animation. So you can see there's all of these keyframes, right? I'm going to take all of it here and just move it a bit. So let's say, I don't know, a few keyframes. We can see that now it's a little bit more better time. So it hits the ground as the explosion comes up. And if we look at the animation of the smoke, it's 0, 0, and then here. That's all I really wanted out of this. Actually, no, I lied. One more last thing I want to add is a bit more extra debris. So you have all these giant pieces flying out everywhere, but I want small pieces too. So the way I do this is basically in this view. Let's create plane. Grab Z direction and then rotate it, let's say 45 degrees in the x-axis. Scale it down a bit and grab it. So it just, I want a ring around the explosion ring that spits out debris. Take this and just just extrude it along this ring. And a really easy way to do this is to do spin. And basically, you can see that, and you basically just grab this. Oh. Okay, that crashed.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Oh no, I didn't save it. Oh, why you do this to me? Okay, it's okay. Just keep going. Okay, I'm gonna redo everything that I just did because Blender crashed and I forgot to save. Okay, it's okay. Oh, I'm still reeling. Oh my god. Okay. You can do this. Save. Rawr. Save. Ooh. Whoa. Save. I didn't really record. I didn't really write down all the details, so this might look a bit different. Save. I am actually regretting the idea of pink smoke because it looks horrendous. So I'm gonna go back here and just turn it back to gray. Save.
Oh my no, God!
Why do you keep crashing?
No, God, please,
I
no!
do not like me.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Compose yourself. Do not freak out. You've experienced worse than this. Oh yeah, spin in an edge. And then I'm just gonna merge this with this. Merge at last. Merge at last. Okay, we're getting there. Anyway, so we got this thing here. Another way to do it is if you merge accidentally all the faces around, you can just do right click, merge by distance, and then you just keep increasing the distance until all the close ones mix together. Save. Okay, this object here is going to be the emitter. So then for that, let's go into particle physics. Yeah, this is a particle system, let's call it. Is that how you spell debris? How do you spell debris? Okay, we're going to have an emitter. The number of emissions, I don't know, let's just do it. Let's go crazy. Let's go 4,000. Frames end is around 60, I think. Don't really need. Actually, no, the frame start needs to be when the explosion starts. So I think that was around frame 13. And frame end 16. Let's just make the lifetime as long. We can randomize the lifetime. Yeah, the maximum is 1 anyway. The velocity, I want the normal, let's try 10. And that's like coming out of the normals, I guess, of the plane. The object velocity is 0, obviously. We also want rotation. We don't want them to all, come out with the same orientation. So I'm gonna randomize this to max phase and randomize phase. Angular velocity, also really important. We don't really want it to come out just stationary, just moving as a rigid body. We want it to come out spinning. So let's increase the angular velocity to 20. Okay, save this. Ooh, okay, I forgot about the fact that, so you can see right now it's just emitting balls. But what we really want to do is get it to emit one of the particles. So the render part, you want to render object. And the object, the instance object, I'm just going to pick one of this cube. I know one of these cubes. So rendered object, we want the scale randomness to be 1 as well. The instance object, let's just do one of these. Be a bit more bold, 0.3. Another thing is I could just always bring this down again. So say 500. Because when it's 500, there's a lot more space in between the particles from each phase, which means that in general it will look a lot more random. Instead of 13 to 60, we want 13 to 35. You need it to have this button on, but like this camera button, but in the actual physics tab, in the render tab, you don't want to show emitter. So now you should be able to see the debris, but not the emitter. Object alignment, so we don't really want the object to align with the tangent, so I want it to spatter. Yeah, so now it's looking more random, so let's actually just keep bringing these numbers up. And okay, bring down the speed to 6. Oh yes, apparently you don't want this to migrate my screen, because that emitter was showing up in the render and I don't want it to look there. It's fine to move the emitter. So let's see what the camera sees. Oh, there's no camera yet. Let's add a camera. I'm not doing anything fancy, so I'm just gonna add a camera. Okay, and let's lock it to view. Lock camera to view. My screencast key has turned itself off again. And I'm just gonna scale out. Oh, I didn't put in a light. Whoops. Let's see. I'm gonna just add a light source and let's see. I'm gonna use cycles to render this because it looks better than Eevee. And for that, turn it to cycles. GPU compute. The render, let's just make it 32. I don't really want this to take too long. Light paths. Don't need that many bounces, that should slow down. I want the output to be, you've got to save the output, let's just save it to my desktop. And I'm going to save it as FFmpeg. And one more thing I want to do is get there to be denoising. Where the heck is it? Where's the denoise button? Ah, okay, there it is. You go into this image little thing and then you click denoising. And you can pick the radius of denoising. I'm just going to pick it as a radius of 2. So basically every 2 pixels they're gonna do some denoising, probably some average stuff. Forgot to turn on my light. Point source light down to 10,000. 50,000 was a bit of a stretch. Sorry guys, my outro was corrupted, but here is the final result from all the tweaks that I've added. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the future videos.